Hi, I'm Paul from the Studio Rats. In today's video, we're going to be looking at the Boss GX-100, and I'm going to be going through all of the different amps that are included in this unit. Now, there's quite a few different amp models inside this unit, and not all the controls are quite what they seem. So I'm going to try and explain as best I can all of those controls. At the end of the video, I'm going to show you a little trick on how to get really great high gain tones by using the divider mix. Now at the moment in my effects chain, I've just got a compressor, a delay and a reverb, and it sounds like this. I'm sure you'll agree that's pretty uninspiring. So what I'm going to do is to pick up one of the amp blocks and I'm going to load that into the effects chain. If I click on the type here, this is where we can choose all our different amp types. The first amp that it chooses for you is the natural amp, but I'm going to click on a transparent and just explain that. Now the transparent amp is basically like your guitar is going to be plugged into a mixing console. So it's a very clean, almost brittle sort of sound, but it's perfect for certain sort of styles of music. So with an electric guitar, we almost get that acoustic quality out of it. Now an amp like this is perfect for your sort of funk sort of stuff, your Nile Rodgers, your Corey Wong sort of stuff. If you want to get this even more authentic for that sort of DI type sound, if you go to the speaker type and you click off, now we're removing the speaker modelling from this. Now I wouldn't recommend this if you're using any sort of overdrive sounds, but it's perfect for those real crystal clean guitar tones. Let's go back to the original and we'll choose the next amp. The next amp is natural. This is what I would always use if I'm going for a clean sort of tone. Now, one of the great things about the Boss AIRD technology is we get different gain types. Now, we can switch them inside the amp, and you can almost think of this as a channel switch on the amp. Now, we can start from a low, which is low gain, to medium, and then high. So with the natural sounding amp, you can get those sort of clean on the verge of breakup sort of tones out of it. Right, let's go to the next one. The next amp is Boutique. As you can hear, we've got a lot more gain with this amp. And now we're getting into that more sort of matchless sound. I know there is a matchless amp a little bit later on in the chain, but you can get that sort of drive tone out of it. If you've got an amp which tends to be on the duller side, like this particular amp, you've got a bright switch. So turn the bright switch on. And bring up the presence. Personally, the Boutique amp isn't one of my favourite, but it's great if you want one of those sort of mid-focused style amps. Next is Supreme. It sounds like this. Right, turn the treble up a bit. Now you'll notice with a lot of these amps that a slight movement in EQ adjustment makes a massive difference to the tone. Let's bring the presence up a little bit as well. If you get an amp like this, or like the boutique one, which is on the duller sort of side, you've got a couple of different EQ options that you can mess around with. You've got this resonance control. If I bring that back, so you can get a bit more brightness out of the amp, and if we bring it forward all the way, it just makes the amp even more mid-forward. So let's bring it back to about 4. So there's the Supreme. The next amp is Maximum. Sounds like this. So here's where we're starting to get into more of the higher gain sort of territory. If you find that you really like a style of amp but it's lacking in some sort of way, sometimes it's worthwhile trying all the different mic types. So at the moment we're using an SM57 style mic. Now if we change that to a 421, the 421 tends to cut the high frequencies but boost the very top end frequencies and boost the bottom end frequencies. On the GX-100, one of my favourite mic types for more of the high gain sort of amps is the 451. The next amp is Juggernaut. We're getting into even more high gain territory. Now the Juggernaut is a really mid-scooped type of tone. Personally, that's not anything that I'd ever use. But if you bring the mid up, and we take it to the high gain setting, it sounds like that. Next amp. Now this is the X Crunch. Now all of the X amps are where personally I feel this unit really excels. Boss have worked really hard in creating some really great tones with these amps, and if you're looking for a more gainy sort of sounding amp, these are the amps to use inside the GX-100. And there's something that happens to the responsiveness of the GX-100 when you start to use these amps. It definitely feels more responsive. So that's X Crunch. Next one is X High Gain. Now this is what I would always use if I'm looking for an overdriven amp. So next we've got X Modded, and you can think of this more like that sort of modded Marshall, that Marshall that sort of goes past what a Marshall can do. Now if you think that's a little bit dull, if you bring the mic setting back to the 57, next we've got the Jc120 amp. This is a jazz chorus style amp, which is an amp that Roland brought out in the, I think it was the 70s, and it's really great for sort of clean tones. Now again, this tends to be quite a bright sounding amp, so let's change the mic type to the 451. Next we've got the twin combo. This is like a Fender Twin. Tends to be quite bright and harsh. But if you bring back the bright switch, bring up the gain a bit, bring back the level. It's quite good for those sort of crunchy tones. Right, next we've got deluxe combo. Now, if I was going to choose a Fender style amp, it would be a deluxe. To me, it sounds way better than the twin. Next we've got the tweed combo. I think what they're using here is a little 8-inch speaker. It sounds quite small and ratty, but it can work really, really well in a mix. Next we've got the diamond amp. Now this is where things start to get a little bit interesting, because personally I don't think the controls are named correctly, but here's the sound of the amp. The diamond amp is Boss's take on an AC30, which is a Vox amp. Now you see we've got the presence control. The presence control on this works more like a cut. So the further back you bring it, so the further towards 0, it gets brighter. And the further forward you bring it, the duller it gets. So if you're using this amp and you switch it on and you go, well, that's really dull, and the presence doesn't work because you're trying to get it brighter, it works the opposite way around. Next we've got the Brit Stack, which is like a Marshall Plexi, and Boss has done a really good job on this amp. Sort of perfect for those AC/DC. It works really well on the mid-gain setting, but if I turn up the gain switch, it also sounds great. Right, let's go to the next one, which is Recti Stack. Now this is like a Mesa Boogie dual rectifier, very mid-scooped. Personally, this isn't an amp that I would ever use, but let's bring the gain up. This amp for me tends to be on the sort of less defined sort of side. Next we've got the match combo. This is Boss's idea of a matchless. Matchless amps are sort of based on Vox style amps, so again you can think of the presence control on this as more of a cut. So if you want the amp to be brighter, bring the presence back towards 0, and if you want it to be darker, take the presence up. So again, it's working in the opposite way. Right, next we've got the BG combo. Right, the presence on this one works the way it should. So it's quite a dull sounding amp. Turn the presence up, you get a bit more brightness out of it. Now this is really good because it's a really focused sort of amp. So if you're looking for an amp that really cuts through the mix, this one might be the best choice. Next we've got an orange stack. Now orange amplifiers tend to, the gain side of things tend to sound a bit more fuzzy, a little bit less defined than say like a Marshall. It sounds like this. And last we've got the Bogner style amp, which is like the real sort of high gain amp. And this one for me works really well with the 451 microphone setting. It takes that harshness off of it. That's the last amp choice, but what we can do with the GX-100 like we can with the GT1000 is we can split the amplifiers. Now I'm going to load in one of these divider mixes. I'm going to load it in just before the amp. And I'm going to bring that amp into the first slot. And I'm going to change that. We can change it to anything you want. Depends on what sort of style of amp that you want. But let's change it to, I'm going to have an X high gain in one. Then I'm going to bring a separate amp into the other side. And I'm going to choose the X modded. Now this is a really great way of blending different amplifiers. So what we can do here is to choose between either amps. If I go to my divider, I can choose between amp A and amp B. Then we've got this mode choice up here. If I change that to dual, this now turns on both of the amps. So what we're doing is we're getting the clarity out of the X high gain and we're getting some of the girth out of the X mod. Now not only can we do that where we're blending both amps, what we can also do if I go to my mix section is to choose a different mode. Now at the moment we're in stereo, so basically both of the amps coming out the same output. But if I change it to pan left and right, one amplifier is going to be panned over to the left and one over to the right, and it sounds like this. I really hope you guys got something out of this video. If you did get something out of it, don't forget to like and subscribe, click on the bell button, and you'll be notified of any future video that comes out from the Studio Rats. I'm Paul, and I'll see you next time.